There is creative control in terms of like, nobody tells me what I can or cannot do apart from reality. I'm Yorgos Lanthimos. I've made 9 feature films and we're going to talk about all of them. Kinetta. I was making commercials for a few years. I started quite young, like 19, 20 years old. I started directing commercials. And when I went to film school in Greece, I mean, there wasn't and there still isn't such a great educational system in terms of cinema. There were very few films being made. And to think that, like a young person would say, this is what I'm going to do in my life, felt like totally absurd. So doing commercials was like an indirect way of being in contact with something that felt relevant to filmmaking. And I never thought that I would actually get to make films. Since we were making enough money from advertising, we just decided that we could do it ourselves and we didn't need that much. We just could get a 16 millimeter camera and go to a place with 3 actors and just film stuff. And we don't need lights, we don't need makeup, we don't need anything. We can just do it like that. Whatever we needed, we had to borrow it from someone. If I wanted a red car and I didn't have a friend who had a red car, we had to pay for a red car and we didn't have any money. After so many years of doing commercials and, we just had an aversion to that and we just wanted to do something totally rough and so spontaneous in every way. And I think it was my most fun experience on a film set because, we're so naive. We never knew even if anyone was going to watch that film. We just did it, for ourselves. Very early on, I also recorded dance performances and I was interested in it. I had friends who were, great choreographers. And so I was really around dance theater early on. And I guess it influenced, how I like to approach performance, rehearsals. It was trying to figure out what it is that doesn't appeal to me in the things that, constitute, advertising, commercials, that world, that aesthetic. And trying to figure out what it is that I am attracted to and how things could be different, which I guess was to an extreme, because if you start from, I don't like this, I want to do something different, you usually find the other extreme, which is an interesting and useful, I think, process. Dogtooth. While I was working in advertising, I had met Efthimis Philippou, who's someone that I worked with on many films. We became really good friends and very close. And I knew him from advertising. He was a copywriter in an advertising agency and he'd never written a screenplay before. But I could see even in the work that he did there that he had a very special mind. Just the stuff that he was coming up with, for commercials that most of them never got made, or we made them and then the clients wouldn't want them, wouldn't air them. And I suggested to him, if you wanted to write a screenplay together. And I brought him the idea of Dogtooth, which was like a really simple idea of what if, there was this family that raised their kids in a way that they didn't know that the rest of the world existed. Mama, μπορώ να έχω το τηλέφωνο. Παρακαλώ. Ευχαριστώ. When I gave him the idea, he just wrote some scenes, like 5 scenes of, what that ignited in him. For this kind of story to work, you needed certain things to be a certain way for the premise to work. So we needed to find a certain type of house that had a fence, which it didn't, so we had to build the fence. So all of a sudden, we started needing to find resources that we didn't have to before. So there was a lot of that going on, which kind of stressed me out. And then, I don't know, there's blood and things and more complicated film stuff that we needed to just figure out, how to do with very few resources.
Woof, woof, no.
For some reason, I absolutely wanted to shoot that film anamorphic. So we had to find a camera, for someone to give us a camera almost for free, and lenses, anamorphic lenses for free. And we found this camera by this guy who, had cameras, but this camera was working a lot on music videos and commercials, so they would just fuck up with the lenses, and they would unscrew them and swirl them or whatever to do effects. And so we got the camera and the lenses, and most of them were like totally out of whack, and we were trying to calibrate them, and we just we didn't know even how to, and we couldn't. And there was one lens, the 50mm lens, that was fine. So we decided to do the whole film on that lens. And again, in the process, that was very freeing because, there are no choices. There's that lens. Just move the camera around, that's it. Like, you don't have to make a choice about that, which frees you to be more focused on other things. There's a work ethic with the actors and everyone involved. Like, you just, work because you love it, and, you can stay for half an hour, more if you need to in order to make it better, because everyone's working towards, the same goal, and, everyone's very flexible and love what they're doing. And it's not about, money and being paid. And so it's easier to just, devote your time and yourself in something that, everybody's investing in. Building a world with rules that, seem kind of over the top for us enhances the observation of how people behave within such a world. Humans need to question the world around them, and that includes, the structure, which is constructed by rules and traditions and everyday behavior that becomes a given. And I find it interesting to question all of those things. And I don't think there can be progress in any way without having people questioning, the state of things at different moments in time. Alps. There was a lot of noise around Dogtooth. It was something like the appeal and the notoriety of it in a certain sense, we didn't expect at all. And I think I had like a strange reaction to it. The fact that it was like getting all of these awards in every festival, and, starting from Cannes, and it went all the way to the Oscars. And at that time, the Academy wasn't that diverse, and, it was quite surprising. Becoming this thing kind of created like a weird negative reaction in me. And then there was all these, actors contacting me saying they want to work with me. And, I got agents, and I went like to meetings in LA, and I didn't know what I was doing there really. I felt it was extreme, and I felt it was fake in a way. So I think my reaction to that was let's not listen to all that, and let's just go and make another film the way we make films.
Πώς θέλει ο όγκος των μαλλιών σου?
Όχι, δεν είναι αυτό.
Ο φίλος μου δεν είχε μαλλιά.
Είναι πρόβλημα αυτό για εσάς?
Όχι. Δεν νομίζω, όχι.
Πολύ ωραία.
I think if Themis came up with the initial idea, I think there was like a letter that a friend found under his doorstep of a guy that was offering his services as a friend or a companion for, you know, a certain fee for a certain time. You know, we started discussing it, and then we kind of shifted it to like, what if you lose someone you love and you want to find a way to kind of keep them alive somehow? And what if there was like this, you know, group of people that offered that kind of service to pretend to be, you know, your dead husband or wife or friend?
Μπορώ να την αντικαταστήσω εγώ αν θέλετε. Η θλίψη σας θα μετριαστεί και μετά από λίγο διάστημα θα εξαφανιστεί εντελώς. 2 ή 3 2ώρες επισκέψεις την εβδομάδα αρκούν. Το τέλος μπορεί να γίνει μια νέα.
In this film, there were a lot of written scenes with a lot of people that hadn't acted before, friends, people that friends of friends, and that really excited me. And what happened between the actors and the non-professional actors. So I try to work with people that have a specific voice and see how I can integrate that in my way of, you know, viewing the world and filmmaking. There's a very interesting tension between the experienced actors with people that have never done it before, because one doesn't know what to expect from the other, and there's that unpredictability. And it creates this tension and energy that wouldn't be there if it was like two actors, like knowing how they're going to do it and where they're going to go next. And so I really love that kind of dynamic. And, you know, a lot of the people in Alps that were not actors were like, there was the waiter from my favorite cafe, and there was a lawyer friend of mine. Yeah, that was something that I kind of kept and, you know, try to do in every film at different levels. The Lobster. After making 3 films this way, basically, in Greece, that's why I decided that I needed to have a few more means in order to be more in control of the result of what I wanted to make. I decided to move to London and make English language films. I realized that it was actually more difficult than I expected to make my first English language film, The Lobster. Well, it took a long time to put it together because maybe some of it was my fault, but certainly there was a misleading enthusiasm about my work. But when I presented The Lobster, people didn't really react well to it. They thought that I decided to make English language films in order to make like more conventional films. That was the expectation, I realized. What we expected was that you're gonna make something, you know, in the English language, which is, you know, conventional, but you'll do a little bit of a twist to it because you're like different. And it only really managed to happen when Colin Farrell and Rachel Weisz got involved.
Are you planning on buying anything else nice for yourself while we're here?
Yes. Contact lens solution and a Parker rollerball.
I didn't know you were short-sighted. I'm short-sighted too.
Now I was working in a totally different structure, in a professional environment, in places that there was a film industry and there were rules, funnily enough, that I had to kind of abide by. I think it was the first or second day on set where the AD was next to me with his watch and going like, I go like, what's wrong with your watch? Is there something wrong? Like, what's going on? And he goes like, you have two more minutes to finish this scene. And I go like, what? I thought he was joking, really. I mean, my AD was like doing laundry and driving people around and like also doing the schedule and like setting down the tracks and like everything. He wasn't like next to me going like, I have to hurry. So it was quite shocking. And, you know, I got acquainted with a different type of mentality, which is like, you know, this is our job. But throughout, you know, making The Lobster, I just couldn't get over how people that are making films, which to me was like a gift and magical, and I could never imagine that I could do it as a real thing. You know, anyone that's involved, how could they not care? And how could they not literally gift 2 extra minutes to get the shot, you know, right? But I guess I understand that, you know, with structure and resources, you know, there needs to be, you know, a set of rules. Otherwise, like, you can go wrong, and there's so many people involved that actually, you know, do make a living through that. And, you know, there needs to be regulation.
Man eats alone.
Well, there's a thing that I don't want to discuss with actors, what the character is, how they should do it, what's their background. I'm not doing any of that because I don't want to limit it. I don't want to narrow it down to something very specific. I also don't want to do it because I want to be as objective as possible while I'm watching them perform. Because I feel like if we've agreed, oh, this character is this way, so he walks this way and he speaks that way, then, you know, we don't have any distance to go like, that's stupid, that looks terrible. So if we haven't agreed that, I don't know what it is that you're bringing, you know, I can just be almost as an audience member and go like, okay, come in through the door. And then I could go like, why are you walking like that? That's ridiculous. Like, what are you doing? Killing of a Sacred Deer. After we finished the screenplay, I felt that it was more of an American film, an American story, that it would kind of be more grounded in a way in America, felt more a natural place for it. We were very scared because we heard all these stories about how it works in America and how, you know, restricting it could be. I mean, it's like with the unions and what you can do and what you can't do, and it's going to be complicated, and all of these things. It works in a different way, and it's more expensive, and, you know, all that. But somehow we filmed in Cincinnati, and it was like the beginning of this period of Cincinnati becoming like a popular place to make films. One of the reasons was like it had this incredibly state-of-the-art hospital, which was a key location for the film, that was very new, and some of the floors were still empty. They weren't being used yet.
Eat a donut.
I don't want it, Dad.
You do. But you're afraid your mother and I will tell you off for eating donuts.
I just had this idea that, you know, the camera was a presence that was observing the characters and would, you know, normally be somewhere high up looking at them, or somewhere really low hiding, you know, watching these people. So that was like the first inclination in order to come up with a set of rules of how are we, you know, filming this. I used zooms, you know, quite a bit. So there was that kind of style, reminiscent maybe of like 70s films or horror films, which I guess the film flirts with the genre.
Stop talking.
Don't you understand that you're wasting time? And you don't have much time left.
I said stop talking.
Steven, it's gonna be better once it's done. Start over. Clean slate. Don't you get it? Sometimes I think you're naive, but you can't be naive. You're a man of science.
The Killing of a Sacred Deer for me was my version of a horror mystic kind of film. But also what happened in the process of writing the screenplay was that I realized there were quite a few parallels with, an ancient Greek tragedy, Iphigenia, and we threw in a couple of things from that as well. Although we didn't start thinking, let's, adapt that. As we were writing the screenplay, we went like, oh, that kind of is reminiscent of some aspects of, that. So, I mean, the title itself is, The Killing of a Sacred Deer is like how the story of the tragedy starts. It's like this sacred deer is killed and it ignites, a whole war and drama and blood shed. The Favorite. The Favorite was actually a project that we were developing for a long time. Well, even before I was involved, there were many years of that story being developed with different writers. And then I started searching for the appropriate writer to work with on it. And we discovered Tony McNamara, who's an Australian writer. And it clicked again kind of in a similar way that I clicked with Efthymis. I found someone that I felt had a strong voice. My vision of The Favorite really, matched his voice.
Seems you have allocated even more money into the abyss that is this fool's errand.
Oh, yes, we will win. Sarah is sure we will win.
This is the landholders' tax. You have no idea the firestorm of rage you have set loose in the countryside.
Really? Are they angry?
Dearest Queen, how do you like my stockings?
Festive.
Very. I was just explaining to the Queen the mistake this tax is. The war as well. We should sue for peace.
Oh, Holly, you are such a bore.
I really wanted Olivia Colman to play the part of the Queen. And when we scheduled it for production, she wasn't available. And I just went, I don't want to make this film without Olivia. Why don't we just, wait for her and make The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is, a screenplay that we have ready. And, people involved in The Favorite kind of freaked out that it was like being postponed once again, because it was a project that was around for many years. But I just, I really couldn't think of anyone else playing that part except Olivia.
Mr. Freeman. Mr. Morley.
I guess it's my tendency to try and break again rules and what's been done with the genre before. And I did look at films that did that. Like there's also, apart from Amadeus, that I think it's, incredible. There's The Madness of King George, which was a great period film made. Peter Greenaway's The Draftsman's Contract we looked at. I mean, I think some of the actual wigs we might have found that were used there, and we made them even, bigger and weirder. And
What an outfit.
Thank you.
but that kind of minimalism visually of that film. But then, weirdly enough, I remember showing Robbie, which was the first time actually working with Robbie Ryan, the cinematographer, stuff like Possession, Zulawski's Possession, in terms of like how the camera moves and interacts. And I started having an interest in, wider lenses. It started on The Killing of a Sacred Deer, having that kind of approach. And then it went further with The Favorite.
The Queen has decided, Harley.
I disagree. A lot. I would like an audience with the Queen where I may state my case.
Stage it to me. I love a comedy. Is there cake?
During that time, mind you, there was a rule of using no artificial lighting. All the way over to The Favorite, I wanted to maintain that kind of freedom on set. So the first time I met Robbie Ryan, I went like, I want to make this film, but, have in mind, I don't use lights. We just use natural light or candles or, practical lights. But I don't want any lights on set. I don't want to be waiting around when we're, changing setups to light people's faces and all that. And, Robbie was, game. Like, he actually took it very seriously to the point of a few days before shooting a night scene outside the castle, he went to me and went like, so, like you said, we're not using any lights. How are we gonna shoot outside at night with no lights? And I go like, Robbie, we're gonna get lights for the night scene. I meant it as the general rule. There is no way of shooting without lights. To me, it was so telling of how devoted he was in maintaining the rules of the game, that he was trying to figure out how we're gonna shoot at night, pitch black, with no lights.
Do it again!
The favorite was, Emma Stone enters, and I find, a kindred spirit, like someone that I communicate without having to say anything. We have a similar sense of humor, and it's easy and funny, and obviously a great actress and gets it, and it just feels right. So by the end of it, we just told each other, I really want to do this again, and we meant it, as history has showed. Poor Things. So Poor Things, I thought it was perfect for Emma. She fell in love with it as well. She fell in love with the character immediately. That film was, I guess, different in every aspect. From telling Robbie we're using no lights and him going like, we're gonna do a night, to saying, this is all gonna be in a studio. Everything is gonna be a set, even exteriors. The cities, everything will be built.
Taxi, madam.
We're shooting a lot of different stocks. We're shooting black and white. We're shooting color negative, and we're shooting Ektachrome as well. When we watched the first images, we were blown away. We also tested VistaVision for the first time, and we shot one scene of Poor Things on VistaVision, the reanimation scene that had no dialogue, because all of the VistaVision cameras that we knew that were working, are extremely loud. But we also pushed, I think, the use of, wide angle lenses as much as we could. And again, being driven by this story, which felt so otherworldly, and using 4mm, 16mm lenses on a 35mm camera, producing those, porthole views of the world, and miniatures and LED walls, and just trying to create this world, mostly being inspired by, old school analog filmmaking, as it would be, back projections. Some of the sets were actually, painted backdrops that we later enhanced in post-production. So it was a way of merging, all this old school type of cinematography, building those sets, painting the backgrounds, and then using either stuff that we created, painted, animated on an LED screen so that, it's more efficient to film it, but everything was created by us.
Do you, Bella Baxter, take this man as your husband?
Did we miss the part about anyone objecting to this? Or has that been removed in some kind of faux modernization of the catechism? Hello, Victoria. You look well.
Do you refer to me?
I just worked by researching music, listening to a lot of music while I was in the editing room, trying things and managing to find the exact thing that felt right for each scene and for the film as a whole. I listened to Judkins' first album, which is very complex, but essentially a pop album, but had such versatility in terms of sound and composition. And I just felt that I found someone that creatively is extremely interesting and I feel very close to in a way. The first, demos that he sent to me, I cried basically, because it was, again, another moment of going like, this, I found a person, like he gets it. This is what he's created is already as a demo, moving. So he composed the entirety of the score before we even shot a frame of the film. Kinds of Kindness. Kinds of Kindness came out of the need to do something different to what we had done with Ephthimis. And I think that at that point we came up with the idea, why don't we just make a film like a triptych and we didn't know if it was going to be like individual short stories as it ended up being, or they would, overlap and show them in parallel. But I think when I also had the idea of using the same actors as we were writing the script, I kept thinking that it would be interesting to use the same actors in the different parts. So that made it clear that we had to make the stories separate so that you wouldn't be confused with the same actors if the stories were told in parallel and not one after another. So that came out of that need of doing something different with Ephthimis, and also working, again with Emma and having the opportunity to do something different with her, and also working with other people that I wanted to work with, like Margaret Qualley and Jesse Plemons, Willem, that we worked together on Poor Things, and he's another, part of the troupe.
Raymond, I've given this a lot of thought, and I can't do what you are asking me to do.
Again, come in and sit down there before you speak.
Raymond.
I want you to come in and sit down there before you speak. Vivian?
I'll leave you two alone now.
I always try to have some time of rehearsal with the actors. Sometimes, the period is really short because we don't have them for a long time, and sometimes we do get more. On The Favorite, actually, we had plenty of time to rehearse. And also, that's when Emma became acquainted with the way I like to rehearse with the actors, which is basically not rehearsing the scenes and the dialogue as they're supposed to be in the film, but doing the exact opposite, kind of deconstructing them, not think about the character and how they're going to do it and how they're going to perform, but going through the lines while playing games, while doing silly things and getting comfortable with each other, getting comfortable with making a fool of themselves in front of everyone, and not care about, how they're perceived or anything like that. And at the same time, like ingesting the text, but unconsciously, without thinking about it intellectually. I think, I just keep saying it's a process of like just creating this family or group or troupe that just gets bigger and bigger, and someone is added every step of the way.
Should we all go upstairs to the bedroom?
I think it's best we don't go up to the bedroom tonight.
So what, we're gonna fuck on the table? Come on, Daniel, that would be weird.
We'd better be getting home soon. Liz, look, you must be tired, and I have to be up early. But everything was wonderful tonight, though.
I think you're right. I think we should leave it for some other time. Maybe next time.
I'll clean up the plates. I just can't stand having food in front of me when I finished eating.
I will help.
No, Martha, you sit. I'll be right back.
No, I want to, please.
Thank you.
Just, maintain that kind of enthusiasm and intimacy with, the actors and, keeping it as simple as possible and focusing on the essence of things. Bugonia. Bugonia was the first time that I received a screenplay and I felt that I wanted to make it, almost as it was. I had never had that experience before. And I read the script, I got really excited, and I sent it immediately the same night to Emma, and she had the same reaction, and we very quickly, decided to get involved. So Will Tracy had written this great script. It was initiated by Ari Aster and Lars Knudsen that, knew of the original film, which I didn't know and I hadn't seen, and neither had Will. The great thing was that Will watched the film once and then he wrote the script just, by using the premise and not going back and trying to make a faithful remake of that film. I think he saw the possibilities and the interest of making something very contemporary that belonged in America.
Thanks, Tony. Feel free to leave early. Unless you're busy. Or you have things to do, but feel free if you can. Up to you.
From its genesis, it was like a contemporary film. Choosing to build this house that it takes place was an important decision. Instead of trying to combine different locations that would be appropriate for the house and then another for the basement, and building that house in a realistic manner was that kind of blending of the worlds. So we built an actual house with the basement there, but it was built. So it wasn't real, but it was at the same time. And there was so much detail that went into it, and especially James Price and his team included so many details in the house, in the backgrounds, things that you never see in the film. You would walk into the house, open every drawer, every pot or whatever, and there was something in there that made sense with the world of the film. And that was so helpful for the actors, to just go there and feel like it's real.
Incredible.
What is?
Just the detail. The best I've seen.
How can you tell she's an alien?
Well, the signs are obvious. They did a hell of a job on it, but the tells are there. Narrow feet, thin cuticles, slight overbite.
It was quite important that we decided to shoot it on VistaVision when we finally found a camera that was slightly quieter than the one we had used before. Using a larger format while filming these, 3 people in a very tight environment, created this conflict between something iconic and larger than life, which is a face, a human face, but within, a fucked up basement. So I think that, again, created this sense of avoiding making the film too literal, because it requires of you a lot of faith in it while watching it. And it requires of you to make judgments and decisions about what you believe, what you don't. So creating it visually, a realistic contemporary film, but with all these heightened details, I think allows for the viewer to believe in those things.
You're going to say that I'm in some kind of internet-induced, auto-hypnotic feedback loop and gatekeepers and norms and all that weak hegemonic horse. But that is precisely the limp rhetoric that you've been instructed to counter the human insurgency with. That's the hyper-normalized dialectic by which you've convinced 7.5 billion people that they're not your captives, to keep us believing in these false institutional shibboleths.
You mean shibboleths?
That's what I said.
The fact that people are willing to question, which brings us, to the beginning, question what the truth is and what reality is, find proof, question the facts that they're being given, and, try and find their own truth. And I find fascinating that now that I'm kind of in it as well, that the more technology advances in science, the more blurred it becomes. Because science has reached a point, like physics and neuroscience, they have reached a point that they understand more, but the more they understand, the more complicated it becomes, and the more you need to believe in something that's not proven, if it makes sense. So there's all these theories, for example, that, we live in a simulation, for example, which again fascinates me. And I'm like, why not? It makes sense what they're saying, and it's scientists that say that. So it's fascinating that, it's a scientist is asking you to believe almost the way that you believe in God or whatever God anyone believes. And it becomes like a similar thing. Like we used to kind of try and disprove the belief in God with science. And now science is kind of asking of people the same thing, to make that leap and believing that there's something that we can't prove and we can't understand, but we have a hunch that that's what's going on, and it kind of feels the same. And I find that fascinating. Talking about all these films, it feels like a more cohesive journey instead of like the way you experience it in life, which is like I'm going from this to this and this overlapped and, complaining about it and not being happy with it all. And, trying to, go through everything, I guess I realized that there is some kind of consistency in a journey, and, and I'm not alone in this journey, and there's like all these people that are jumping on the boat and, trying to achieve, similar goals, and I might be willing to make another film, which I was doubting for a little bit.